And now we get to hear how President Humble will build a lasting peace. First, in dealing with those nations that break rules and laws, I believe that we must develop alternatives to violence that are tough enough to actually change behavior. For if we want a lasting peace, then the words of the international community must mean something. Sort of like we tried with Saddam Hussein before we went to war to dethrone him. How many UN sanctions did he get? How many warnings were there over the course of a decade? Which new words does President Obama have in mind? And what new power will enforce those words to make them mean something? He gives us a hint, telling us how this wishful thinking policy will be applied in two current crises. Quote, but it is also incumbent upon us to insist that nations like Iran and North Korea do not game the system. And those who seek peace cannot stand idly by as nations arm themselves for nuclear war. So we just have to insist and not stand idly by, and then we'll get what we want with both Iran and North Korea. How's that working so far? There are three pillars to the Obama peace plan. We're ready for the second one now. We're going to be told the type of peace that we have to pursue. Quote, only a just peace, based on the inherent rights and dignity of every individual, can truly be lasting. Thanks again, wise President Obama. Your faux profundity is boundless. While we're being told about the second pillar of the Obama peace doctrine, we're told about the, quote, choice between the pursuit of interests or an endless campaign to impose our values around the world. I reject these choices. I believe that peace is unstable where citizens are denied the right to speak freely or worship as they please, choose their own leaders, or assemble without fear. If that sounds familiar, it's because you're remembering President George W. Bush's second inaugural address, in which he told us, quote, America's vital interests and our deepest values are now one. From the day of our founding, we have proclaimed that every man and woman on this earth has rights and dignity and matchless value because they bear the image of the Maker of heaven and earth. Across the generations, we have proclaimed the imperative of self-government because no one is fit to be a master and no one deserves to be a slave. Advancing these ideals is the mission that created our nation. It is the honorable achievement of our fathers. Now, it is the urgent requirement of our nation's security and the calling of our time. While we're unapologetically pursuing our national self-interest, we will, quote, bear witness to the hundreds of thousands who have marched silently through the streets of Iran. Again, I don't recall. Did we take a strong stand with those marchers? Look it up. There must be something on the White House website about the position this country took during that time of crisis in Iran. Maybe that was the first example of what the president referred to in his speech as painstaking diplomacy. Exactly what does that mean? What is the antonym of painstaking in that context? Maybe there's a hint in the president's next sentence. Quote, I know that engagement with repressive regimes lacks the satisfying purity of indignation. The president continues, But I also know that sanctions without outreach, condemnation without discussion, can carry forward only a crippling status quo. No repressive regime can move down a new path unless it has the choice of an open door. Oh, so that's painstaking diplomacy. We should give them an open door, talk to them, be nice. For example, I guess we should have been nicer to Stalin and Lenin, Pol Pot, Gaddafi, Saddam Hussein, and now Ahmadinejad and Kim Jong-il. So to make the point, we're given a few historic examples of engagement. Fine as far as it goes, but I would ask the President to refrain from changing the facts when discussing our history, especially when he's traveling overseas. He tells us, quote, Ronald Reagan's efforts on arms control and embrace of perestroika not only improved relations with the Soviet Union, but empowered dissidents throughout Eastern Europe. Not exactly, Mr. President. Ronald Reagan never embraced perestroika or anything about the Soviet Union, as he was not trying to improve relations with that tyrannical, totalitarian force. President Reagan had openly, consistently rejected containment and détente. Furthermore, any efforts on arms control were not nearly as crucial to Reagan's success on the world stage in the consequent destruction and collapse of the Soviet Union, as were three events exemplifying his rejection of détente and containment. First, a massive arms buildup. Second, his answer when asked about his strategy for the Cold War: we win, they lose. And third, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. Moving on to the third pillar of the Obama peace regimen. The President tells us that a just peace includes not only civil and political rights, it must encompass economic security and opportunity. For true peace is not just freedom from fear, but freedom from want. Yep, something like from each according to his ability, to each according to his need. You see, security does not exist where human beings do not have access to enough food, or clean water, or the medicine and shelter they need to survive. Do not have access. That word access. It's been so long since I heard that word not followed by affordable health care. I was a little bit confused for a minute. But the same point could be made here about food, water, and shelter that we should be making about health care. Access to something implies that somehow that thing is supplied, that somehow it exists. I suppose that in the Obama world, one group of humans gets to take their means of survival from someone else. Or maybe those things just appear from thin air. I'm not sure. But I do know that we're admonished by the President that, quote, the absence of hope can rot society from within. Yes, and most assuredly, the absence of freedom and personal responsibility will rot that society.